means for small businesses in Spokane and throughout Eastern Washington. And I really do appreciate all the business owners who have joined us today to share their personal stories. You know, when we were crafting the American Rescue Plan, I relied on conversations just like this one to be able to bring the stories of Washington State business owners back to the other Washington to help me get small business owners the support that I know they so need. And I'm going to be talking a little bit for a minute here about what we were able to get for small businesses, but also I'm interested to hearing from everybody today about what has worked and what hasn't, and what more needs to be done. So let me start by talking a little bit about what we just did with the American Rescue Plan, thanks in no small part to the advocacy of small business owners and advocates like we've got today. Earlier this month, we were able to deliver a COVID relief package that finally begins to meet the scope and scale of the crisis people here in Washington State have been facing for the past year. In terms of support for small businesses, the American Rescue Plan continues the investments in existing programs like the $7.25 billion nationwide for additional first and second round PPP loans to small businesses and to nonprofits, $15 billion in targeted funding for the SBA's economic injury disaster loans, and $1.25 billion nationwide for SBA grants specifically for live venues. It also provides $28.6 billion fund for a new SBA grant program specifically for restaurants and other food and drinking establishments that have been impacted, as we all know, so much by this pandemic. Those are the pieces that get the most attention, but the package will and already is making other improvements too, as we all know, targeting funding to business owned by women and veterans and socially and economically disadvantaged individuals who may not have been able to easily access federal relief in the past. And that, of course, is on top of everything else in this package, putting money in families' pockets, getting our schools reopened safely, getting vaccines in the arms of people so we can end this pandemic, help for our states and local governments and tribes so they can get back to where they need to be to help people that live in their communities. And all of these pieces are really interconnected. With more people vaccinated, more money in families' pockets, better infrastructure, we'll be able to get through this crisis faster and build back fairer and stronger, which is actually what small businesses all want and what we all want. So just to be clear, what we passed in this bill is not everything we need to do. I'm here today to listen to what's working, what's not working. And by the way, we are still working past the pandemic relief plan. Last week, we extended the PPP program till May 31st because we know this pandemic isn't over and small businesses are still struggling. So we know there's more to be done. But with that, I want to open it up to our panelists today to talk about what's happening in their business. And I'm going to start with Alicia. If you want to share with us what you know. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Murray, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alicia Benson, and I am the CEO of Greater Spokane Incorporated, which is the regional business development organization. And to start, I want to say thank you to Senator Murray and her colleagues for their work and effort to make sure that we're dedicating resources and relief to the millions of small businesses and therefore their families and the families of their employees. So thank you for this important work and for the opportunity to have this conversation today. GSI, along with our partners, were honored to help disseminate nearly $30 million in CARES funds in the Spokane region over the course of this past year to our small businesses and nonprofits through grants, free PPE distribution, and marketing to both support our citizens here in the region and those looking to come to our region to help build confidence in our economy and re-engagement in our economy. Those grants alone served over 2,000 businesses and nonprofits here in the region. Today, we still know that our smallest businesses and certain sectors, like the ones you're going to hear from today, are still hurting, and that recovery has been really uneven here in the Spokane region and across the state. And so we're in discussions with our partners and with our elected officials around what supports can look like as we continue through our recovery of this pandemic. With the American Rescue Plan funds, it's really critical that our community is strategic and that we're organized in how we invest these funds into our region, and that these are dollars that are significant and have long-lasting impact. Working with our partners and with our elected leaders, we want to be able to build resiliency and long-term recovery with these dollars. We want to be able to think about how we're targeting those investments to help the business community recover for the long term. The other thing I want to say is that for GSI in particular, we're thankful for the inclusion of the 501c6 organizations. These are your chambers of commerce, your economic development organizations, tourism organizations. Many of us were serving from the very beginning on the relief efforts for our communities. And so thankful that we've been included now in this most recent package because the work that we do is so instrumental for helping our communities recover. And so I want to thank you for that and look forward to the conversation and the discussions and ideas for how we can continue to power forward. So thank you for having us here and for the work that we've done to date. And I want to turn this over to Trent Meyer with Trailbreaker in Liberty Lake. Hi, Trent.
Hello. Looks like I'm unmuted. You can hear me okay?
Yep.
So, as Alicia said, I'm Trent Meyer. I own Trailbreaker Cider. We're kind of a newer company in the Spokane area. We've been around for a while. We were originally down in Pullman, Washington, and relocated up here and opened our restaurant doors in 2019. So it's been kind of an interesting situation for us because we've essentially started up a restaurant 3 times since we first set off to do that in 2019. We received some PPP money in both the first and second draw, what we consider to be a pretty significant amount of money that certainly has kept the doors open and most importantly, I think, kept people employed. For us, our team, a lot of small business owners stand by their team. It would have been devastating to have to retrain or find the caliber of people that we already had. And of course, with the starting and stopping, opening and closing, we weren't really set up as an operation that could stay open the whole time. Our cider factory is either turned on or off. It's just kind of a unique challenge to, I suppose, many brewery kind of settings. To make 10% of your volume is not really feasible. So for us, it was really important. Many of the adjustments that were made during the PPP rollout and from the first and second, we actually, oddly enough, got less money in the second one, even though it was targeting restaurants. And I think part of that was due to us being open part of 2019 and the direct sort of word by word interpretation instead of the intent of the rule, I think, often that the banks and the SBA took. I know personally this was a challenge for us to try to almost walk the banks and the SBA through what we thought was intended. It does seem to me, and perhaps this can be clarified as well, that the latest round does seem to be kind of a catch-all where it will take into account, it seems to me will take into account reductions that maybe have occurred, but will, because they're kind of factoring the PPP money into a restaurant's application for the full time period, it sounds like that will help straighten it out. And I certainly hope that's the case. Not just for ourselves, I think I speak for a larger audience here in Spokane, that what we face is maybe we don't have the capacity issues that a lot of folks do because we have a pretty big facility, but that's obviously been an incredibly difficult challenge and still remains even at the 50%. And we're all assuming this is going to get better very quickly, but we don't know that. So I think that's got some people optimistic, but maybe a little bit nervous. And any other questions you have, I'm kind of an open book about it, but that's kind of a gist of our history with it and some of the concerns and thoughts moving forward.
And I think now we'd like to hear from Caleb and Carly.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for having us. So we are the owners of Lucky You Lounge here in Spokane. We are a music venue, nightclub, restaurant, bar, all of these things under one roof. It's a pretty big space. We also opened in May of 2019. So we had almost a year to get the business up and running. We previously owned a smaller venue in town called the Bartlett. That was an all ages 150 capacity music venue. And then we closed that when we opened Lucky You, which is a bigger space. It's about twice the size. So yeah, it's been a really difficult last year for us. I mean, we not being able to do concerts and have any type of nightlife environment is, it's significant for us. I mean, it's a huge loss of revenue. And we had to pivot into just making our restaurant function, which was a secondary piece of the business when we first opened. So we didn't actually get very much revenue from that. But I will say that I'm very thankful for the money that has been given out through the American Rescue Plan. We have gotten both rounds of PPP funding. We also got an EIDL. So that has absolutely made it so we could survive through this. I mean, without any of that help, we most likely would have filed bankruptcy and shut down by now. So that was huge. We also got one of the grants through the Spokane hospitality, and we got a grant through Spokane Arts as well. So all of these things have really helped us reopen when we could through this time. We were able to do some significant remodeling to our space in order to make the restaurant actually function better and not just be a music venue. So we were able to pivot effectively, I feel like, through receiving this money. And we are also looking forward to applying for the SVO grant, which is for the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, which is for music venues, museums, zoos, and theaters. Yeah. Carly has also been working with an organization called Keep Music Live, which is a Washington-based organization that's been advocating for music venues specifically to try to raise money to give out grants as well, which we also got one of those, which has been huge. I would say that our biggest concern through all of this, while we're happy that we still exist as a business, we have about twice as much debt as we did before this, and that's huge for us. I mean, without having any clue when we're able to get back to 100% capacity, the current restrictions on doing live music make it nearly impossible for us to do it. And so we're looking to the fall, mostly starting to book music, but we really have no idea if that's going to work and what capacity will be by then, what restrictions will be. And I guess with debt payments coming back later this year and early next year, once we will have exhausted the SVO grant, which we hopefully will get, we're nervous. We're nervous about what the other side of that looks like and whether or not we'll even be able to do enough business to sustain the amount of debt that we've incurred through this. So I think that we're looking hopeful to the future, but we're also just kind of have no idea what that's going to look like. So we're going to try our best to be frugal with what we have and try to make smart decisions through this. But it's definitely a lot of, pivoting constantly and trying to figure out from week to week, month to month, what it's going to look like and what we need to do to make things work for our staff, for the business in the long run, keep our staff on as well so we don't have to keep training new people, and all of these different things that are on top of, the stress of just running a small business in general. So, but I will say that we are so thankful for where we are and the help that we have gotten through this. And I'm going to turn it back over to Amir.
Thank you so much, Caleb and Carly, for sharing your story, and for all of our other participants. So now we can begin press Q&A. So as Charlie's email noted, if you could just use the raise your hand function, I will call on you and then you can unmute yourself. Feel free to turn on your video if you would like, and then just list your name and your outlet before you ask your question. So please just raise your hand if you have a question, and I will call on folks in the order they do.
Amir, while you're waiting to find people who are raising their hands, let me just thank all of our participants for sharing your stories. I think what you said, Caleb, in terms of being hopeful but concerned is where we all are. Nobody knows where this pandemic is going to go. It's taken turns none of us have anticipated or wanted. I think we're all hopeful. We want vaccines to get in arms. We want to get our arms around this, but I want you all to know we're going to be there as we get through this, no matter what curveballs come at us. We want to make sure you survive. And I know the debt is probably weighing on everybody's heart right now. We got to see where that is and work with all of you to get through this. We want you there at the end of this day.
All right, just gonna put out one last call for questions. Please just use the raise your hand function. Okay. I will go ahead and say if there's anyone who is struggling to figure out how to use the raise your hand function, feel free to just unmute yourself. Otherwise, I will assume that we have no questions.
I'm going to assume everybody did such a good job that we answered every question. But I will say this, that the American Rescue Plan, I know, went a long way towards helping small businesses like the ones we heard about today. That's exactly what all of us were thinking as we wrote the bill. And I really appreciate everybody taking the time today to tell us what you're working through and how you're doing. I want to say the end is in sight, hopefully, but I'll take your stories back with me to Washington, D.C. and work to make sure we've got the support you need to make it through the rest of this pandemic. So I really, really appreciate everybody taking time today to fill us in. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all. Good luck. Can't wait to see you in person.
Thanks, folks. We'll go ahead and close this out. Thank you to the reporters who hopped on. If anyone comes up with any questions, you know where to find us.
Thank you.